Hello everyone, this is RVer Frank. Today we are headed to Camp Independence, which is situated in Inyo County on the north side of Oak Creek, about 3 miles from the town of Independence in the Owens River Valley. Never officially designated a fort, it was established to provide protection for the area's miners who were troubled by Indian marauders. Regardless, when a 50-foot flagpole was erected and the old flag with all of the stars upon it hoisted into the breeze, Lieutenant Colonel George S. Evans could report there were 3 times, 3 given most heartily by the men, and a salute fired with small arms. The day was July 4th, and Independence was the logical choice for a name. When it was established in 1862, a California cloudburst signaled the occasion, somewhat dampening the spirits of the men. The original camp was here, with soldiers living in caves. These were used during the first year of the post. The first quarters were rude huts and caves hollowed out of a nearby ravine. Early soldiers at Camp Independence lived in this cave, one of several at the original site. Rooms have been hollowed out and there are overhead holes for chimneys. Walls bear soot traces from early fires and from more modern ones of local campers and children. The ravine with the original camp's eaves is on the right at this point. The post side is on the left, a few hundred yards away. The conditions at Independence may have had something to do with the unsavory situation. This also may have accounted for the fact that within a few months there was at least one attempt at mutiny by the garrison. When the weather turned wintry in September, the troops took advantage of Evans' temporary absence by packing up and leaving. The situation was resolved before the dead of winter set in. Adobe barracks were built by soldiers who had divided their talents between engineering and Indian skirmishing. The post cemetery, an eighth of a mile from the post, was 200 feet square with fence surrounding it. Today, only townspeople's graves remain, with most legible markers having dates in the 70s and 80s. Early on, Camp Independence had complaints by the surgeon. The great need at the post is shade during the summer months, because there are few shade trees and no verandas around the building. A large number of trees have been set out, but as yet have not attained sufficient size to be of use. Then, some years later, the surgeon noted things had changed. The present buildings are located on the 4 sides of a parallelogram, forming the parade ground and lawns in front of the officers' quarters. These grounds are set out with trees and covered with grass. A live hedge forms the westerly boundary of the camp. He noted the barracks was 164 feet long by 30 feet wide, well lighted and well warmed with stoves. Most buildings were of frame except for storehouses, which were former barracks and of adobe. The chimneys all were of adobe, but they were carefully braced with wood and extended above the roofs by galvanized iron flues on account of earthquakes, he added cautiously. Even 155 years later, Native Americans in California's Owens Valley still recall with bitter reluctance the darkest day in their relations with the whites. The date was July 10th, 1863. The place, year-old Camp Independence. Throughout the day, tribesmen in the area had answered the summons to the post issued by Captain Moses A. McLaughlin, previously the relentless commander of Camp Babbitt. When more than 1,000 Native Americans were gathered on the parade ground, McLaughlin called the chiefs to the center and ordered the others to sit on the ground. Through an interpreter, he informed them that they were to be tip-rooted from their native hunting grounds and march 200 miles southwest to abandon Fort Tejon. He knew they would react unfavorably and was prepared. During the night, the troops slept upon their arms on the parade ground, ready at a moment's notice to prevent any attempt at escape. The Indians knew it was hopeless, as expressed by their chief. "American captain sabe much, Indian poco." 70 soldiers guarded the sorrowful procession when it started the next morning. Only a few wagons were available for some of the women and children. The midsummer weather was unbearably hot. The sufferings upon the route were intense, understated McLaughlin. The fact that only 850 Indians finished the trek spoke more eloquently of the hardships. Escape for some, death for others had taken their toll from the total. Months later, most of the survivors had returned to Owens Valley. Fort Tejon had been unbearable under McLaughlin. It was small consolation to the refugees that 6 months after their merciless march, McLaughlin would be relieved of his command and face a court-martial. This was an old story to him. At least once before, charges had been placed against him for cruelly beating and maltreating one of his troopers. McLaughlin had come to independence as a confirmed Indian hater, as a massacre of 35 while at Camp Babbitt attested. Local tradition places some of the blame for his actions on alcohol, and one story suggests that he did not confine his anger to Indians when his patience was tired. On one occasion, the tale goes, his drinking was disturbed by general restlessness in the corral. He ordered 2 soldiers to shoot every horse that was moving around. They refused to obey. McLaughlin had them put in the guardhouse, from which they escaped by removing the hinges. Once they had put McLaughlin far behind them, they turned themselves in at another army post. After the exodus of the Native Americans to Tejon, the post was abandoned over the protest of settlers. Headquarters suggested the settlers organize a home guard. As General Wright paternally informed them, what they needed were militia companies composed of loyal and true men, always ready to defend their own firesides and uphold the Constitution, the laws, and the Union. The appeal to patriotism was not enough to quiet the Indian raiding that followed the camp's abandonment. In December 1864, Nevada volunteers were ordered to re-garrison Camp Independence, and it remained active for 13 more years. Temporarily abandoned in 1864, it was reoccupied in March 1865 due to renewed Indian depredations. The post was finally abandoned on July 5, 1877. The military reservation was transferred to the Interior Department for disposition on July 22, 1884. The building, which served as the commanding officers' quarters, was moved from its original site to its new setting in Independence, to 303 Edward Street, the town's name for US 395, on the west side of the highway near the center of town. Number 349, Camp Independence. At the request of settlers, Colonel George Evans led a military expedition to this site on July 4, 1862. Hence its name, Independence. Indian hostilities ceased and the camp closed. War again broke out in 1865 and the camp was reoccupied as Fort Independence until its abandonment in 1877. This fort made possible the early settlers in the Owens Valley.